Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I know it's been a while. For my new people, if you are taking an FTCE exam soon, please go ahead and check out my previous videos. I talk about the ESE exam, the FTCE general knowledge test, that's the math, the English, and the other portions. So if you are interested in checking those out, please go ahead and check out my content on this channel. But today is for my new teachers, my brand new teachers who are going through it and have their formal observation coming up. I know what you're going through, and yes, it is crazy. So this video is just to give you a little overview of what the observation is, or like what to expect. I am not a professional on this, but based on experiences, I can give you a few pointers. So, how many times are you observed? You are observed 2 times a year as a new teacher. For the teachers that are experienced, I think they only observe them once a year. So, if you have your observation coming up, they should have already given you a date with your planning conference, your date that you're going to be observed, and your post reflection conference, right? So if you are wondering what these are, these I'm going to go into it basically. But before I explain those, please make sure that your self assessment is done. I'm not sure how this works for other states, but in Florida, for example, in the Broward County area, or I'm not sure if your school uses the Morzano FTEM method of evaluations. I'm not sure if they use that, but if they do, you could find out. So please make sure your self-assessment is done, which can be found in the eye observation. And this, I believe, is 15% of your overall evaluation as a teacher. The other components are the instructional practice, which is basically just your data marks, or what you are the score you got from your observation. That's throughout the school year. And the student performance, which is done at the around 3 years, where they are basically monitoring your growth, how much students have grown as you teach them throughout the years. So if we scroll down, you already see the evaluation components. Yes, so the deliberate practice would be your self evaluation, your self assessment, which you will be doing in eye observation. So you want to make sure that you get that done. Next is what to do before your planning conference. The planning conference really is where you and your observer is going to sit down and discuss what you will be teaching. So as it says here, the teacher identifies the academic standards or standards-based learning targets for the lesson. They research the research-based strategies that will help students learn, and student evidence that needs to be generated to demonstrate they have learned the standard or the learning target. So what you really want to do is you want to really think about the standard that you will be teaching. So for example, if you are doing math and you're on like unit 2 or something, and say you're supposed to do, for example, 2.1 on Monday, for example, or your observation is on the Tuesday when you're doing 2.2. On Monday, you have to ensure that you give them a pre-test, right? So that will be one of your evidence to show how much the students have grown. So I would really advise going into Savas, printing out a pre-test. Maybe you could go quick check. So if you want to go to Savas and maybe print out 1 and 2 questions from the quick check for that topic. So for example, as I said, if you are on unit 2 or topic 2 and you teach topic 1, 2.1 on Monday, and you want to teach topic 2.2 on Tuesday, then you would go to syllabus and then you'd go to topic 2.2 and you would go to the quick check area and you would look for the teacher resources and print maybe 1 or 2 questions from it, and then you give the students the day before, a couple weeks before, before you have your observation, to see where they are at or how much they already know. That would serve as a evidence. Your pre-test would be a evidence, and then you would give them that same test again as a post-test for your last conference, which will be the post-reflection conference. So that is just a tip right there. So you want to have your evidence to show in your post-reflection conference how much the students have grown. So you want to have your pre-test where they're not going to do so well because clearly they don't know how to do that skill yet. And then when you teach them on the observation date, that's when they're going to learn it. And then before your post reflection, you will give them that post test. You're going to give them the pre test again, which we call the post test, to see how much they have grown. And so the whoever is observing you is going to look at how much they have grown, and that's going to be a part of your grade. So back to what I was saying now. I know it's a lot, but this is just I just wanted to let you know what the planning conference is, which is when you and the observer meet to discuss what you will be teaching. You want to ask yourself what standard. So if you go into syllabus and you click on, for example, 2.2, this is just an example. They will show you the objective. So for example, tell whether one group is greater in the number than another group. So you would say students will be able to state whether one group is greater in number than another group, and then you would look for which standard. So for example, the standard for that would be MA.K.NSO.1.4, which says compare the number of objects from 0 to 20 in two groups using the terms less than, equal to, or greater than. That's just an example. So you want to look at that standard. That standard is basically telling you that you're going to have students compare objects, whether it's from 0 to 20. So whether it's one set that has 6 cars, another set that has 10 cars, and you're going to have the students use the terms yet less than, equal to, or greater than. So that's where your teaching component comes in, where you would have to teach them what is less than, what is equal to, what is greater than. So you have to really look on your standard to decide what you will be teaching during that observation. So that's what you want to really sit down and think about, what you are teaching. Also, what materials do you need? And I always advise using hands-on activities in your lesson. Make sure your lesson is hands-on. Observers love to see hands-on stuff when you are teaching, because guess what, those hands-on get the students engaged, and you want the students to be engaged because observers like to see that, because that's a whole portion too of how you're going to be scored, how engaged the students are. Also, you want to consider the student needs, accommodations or modifications. Do you have English language learners in your class? You have to think about how you're going to cater to them. Are you going to use visuals? Are you going to give them a picture dictionaries? Just a lot of things you got to think about. And before that planning conference as well, you have to fill out the Morzano focused teacher evaluation model. So that's a paper that they are going to provide to you. As I said, not all schools do it like that based on the state that you are in. But usually they say that the planning conference is not required, but is 100% advised and recommended that you go, because it will just make things much easier, make your score better, because you're going to discuss and you're going to get feedback from the observer. The observer may be your assistant principal, it might be your principal, or it just might be some person that they have that is qualified. So before we talk about the planning conference form, in which you have to fill out before you go to the planning conference, these are just the talking points that you and your observer will be going over. I'm talking about the planning conference form specifically, which I will show you in a minute. This is what everything is about. They are looking at the Morzano Focus Teacher Evaluation Model. So it has four portions: the standards-based planning, the standards-based instruction, the conditions for learning, and professional responsibilities, right? So if you look at this standards-based planning, this has three parts: planning standards-based lessons, aligning resources to standards, and planning to close the achievement gap using data. This is a standards-based instruction. You are identifying critical content from the standards. If you realize, they highlighted that part because that part is really important. Previewing new content, helping students process new content, and you can go ahead and read the rest. And this part is conditions for learning. Using formative assessment to track progress, providing feedback and celebrating progress, organizing students to interact with content, and you can go ahead and read the rest there. And the professional responsibilities section, which is adhering to school and district policies and procedures, maintaining expertise in content and pedagogy, and promoting teacher leadership and collaboration. I will mostly be focusing on these three areas which I know about, because these are the three areas they want to see in your observation, and this is the three areas you will be scored on according to your post reflection conference, where you will get your score, right? Your observation score. And back to the PowerPoint, remember I stated that you are going to be observed based on instructional practice, which is basically observations, and data marks, which is 50% of your overall evaluation. So I hope I did not lose you there, but I will be showing you these planning conference questions, right? When you go to meet the observer, these questions should already be answered by you. So you should already state: number one, what is the standards you are working towards this lesson? What is the specific learning target and taxonomy levels for this lesson? You have to answer that. You have to answer which instructional strategies will you use to help students reach your learning target. If you realize there are three sections on this planning conference form, you have the planning standards-based lessons / units, you have the aligning resources to standards, and you have the planning to close achievement gap using data. This is on your protocols. These are how you will be evaluated. If you realize at the bottom part of each of these, you have needed, emergent, proficient, accomplished, and exemplary. They will score you based on this criteria down here. So they want to see if you are going to include something from each of these portions in your observation, right? And if you realize, they go back to ask you these sections, you discuss these sections with the observer, and also in the post reflection questions as well. You That is the one you get your score at. They also discuss these sections with you again. So that is something that you need to be aware of. In the reflection conference, you will be discussing if you use a standards-based planning, if you use standards-based instruction, and if you use conditions for learning, right? This chart right here, conditions, standards-based instruction, and standard-based planning. So this is to show you that everything goes back to this right here. Now let's go to the protocol. The protocol kind of breaks it down for you so you understand, right? So the first one, for example, is the planning standards-based lessons and unit. If this looks familiar to you, yes, you just saw it on the planning conference form. So that means they are looking for this, right? So let's break this down. Focus statement. The focus statement specifically is what the teacher should be doing as they implement the strategy, right? Below it is the desired effect. The desired effect is what the students should be doing if this strategy is being implemented. And the scale is, for example, it is a title, the needed, the emergent, the proficient, accomplished, and so on. Proficient is when the teacher is doing the strategy correctly, but less than the majority are displaying the desired effect in students' um, taxonomy. So that's just an example of, you know. So let's go into it now. So as I just read a while ago, these are strategies. Strategies you will be using in your lesson. You should indeed be using identifying critical content from the standards. That's the first thing you need to do. Make sure you have your standard. Make sure you know which standard you're teaching, and make sure you yourself understand the standard. What will your student be able to do after you're done teaching the lesson? So the focus statement, for example, for this one says, teacher uses the progression of standard-based learning targets that may be embedded within the performance scale to identify accurate critical content during a lesson or part of the lesson. So are you using the standard? The desired effect is evidence demonstrates students know what content is important and what is not important. Then you're going to look at the example teacher instructional techniques. Will you identify a learning target aligned to the grade level standards? Will you begin and end the lesson with focus on learning target? Will you provide a learning target? Will you relate classroom activities to the target? Will you identify and accurately teach the critical content? Will you use verbal cues? Will you use storytelling and dramatic instruction? So these are just examples of the techniques that you can use to implement this strategy right here, which is identifying critical content from the standards. Example teacher instructional, when appropriate, use cultural examples to connect learning activities to the learning target or critical content, right? And then the technique for monitoring learning is using, either you're going to use a group activity, you're going to use a student work, or you're going to use response methods. Example of a desired effect: start conversation in groups, focus, create non-linguistic representation. Example of student evidence. Example. So it just basically gives you examples here, right, of the instructional techniques you can use. All right. So you must be saying, what is this? That's what I asked myself as well when I first looked at it, because I didn't know what this is either. But I can show you how it comes in. So let's go back to our planning conference sheet. If you would like to see a video of me going in the conference and the post-reflection conference forms, please let me know down below in the comment section. I can make a video just for that, because I know these questions are seems very hard, but if you would like, I could go over these with you. So for example, so let's go back to my planning conference question. Look at number 2. It says, which instructional strategies will you use to help students reach a learning target? How are these targets aligned to the cognitive levels of the target? No, I could go back to call and I could answer this by saying this would be under identifying critical content from standards. So I am going to say I will identify critical content from standards by beginning, this is here, beginning and ending the lesson with focus on the learning target to indicate the critical content of the lesson. So this is what I'm talking about. You need your protocol to answer the questions because they are related. I will help students practice skills, strategies, and processes by engaging students in guided practice and independent practice. So that's just answered my teacher techniques for monitoring learning. That's what I just answered right here. So this protocol is just to help you, and it just guides you into what you should be doing during each part of your lesson. So this part would be for the standards. What are you doing in as it relates to your standards? How are you incorporating it, right? This part, let's go back. Okay, so this part has to be doing previewing new content, right? If you're going to do a little introduction, this shows how you're going to introduce the lesson. What can you use from here to introduce the lesson? So the observer just wants to see you incorporating some of these, all of these strategies, right? Helping students process new content. How are you going to help them to process new content? Are you going to break the content into appropriate chunks? At the reflection conference, the principal or whoever your observer is, or the assistant principal, is going to score you based off these portions. So if you see needed, emergent, proficient, accomplished, exemplary, they are going to score you based off that. They're going to decide if you implemented the strategy. If you realize, you see data right here, you see 0 to 50, 51 to 90, and you see 91 to 100. Remember, earlier I told you the observer is going to want to see data. So that pre-test and the post-test, they are going to put those scores together. They're going to divide it. And if it comes up to whatever percent, this is how you're going to be scored. Usually, back to your planning conference, the observer is going to ask you what is your passing grade or your passing mark. So, for example, if you say, oh, I want the students, my goal is to have the students score at least 70% after I teach the lesson, they're going to add those up. So they want to see how many of those students scored at 70% or higher, and they're going to see if that comes out to how much percent of your students scored that score. So if 0 to 50% of your students got a 70 and higher, they're going to score you proficient in this area. If your students scored a 51, if 51% of your students to 90% of students scored 70% or higher, you're going to get accomplished. And if 91 to 100% of your students scored 70% and more, you will be scored exemplary in the different areas. So this data based, right? So all of this right here is data based. If you realize in every one of these, it has 0 to 50, 51 to 90, 91 to 100. Once again, this is how you are scored. They will be scoring you based on how how your students performed. That's why it's important to do a pre-test and a post-test, because they're going to use that data to decide if 0 to 50% or 51 to 90% or 91 to 100% of your students um, got reach your goal. And you don't want to tell them you want your student to score 50%, because that's not really good. You want to have a good grade, like a 70%, I should say. You want your student to score 70% or higher. So that's why the planning conference is important, because you're going to go over this with the observer as well. And that's why you have to look through all of these portions to see what your lesson will include, and to see how these portions are going to be scored, because you want to have at least a proficient in each of these area. Because if you have a proficient in each of these area, you also want to aim for accomplished or exemplary in each of these area, because if you score, that's going to give you a good end score, which for the end score you either have to score highly effective, needs improvement, or unsatisfactory. You want to be in the highly effective or the effective. So when they add all of these up, it's gonna give you an end score. So if you have all proficients, all accomplished, or some proficient, some accomplished, some exemplary, they are going to give you a score at the end. If you get a 3.45 to 4.0, then that means you're highly effective. Yes, you did awesome. If you got a 2.5 to 3.449, that means you're effective. That is still good. But you do not want to score a needs improvement or unsatisfactory. A needs improvement means you scored 2.0 to 2.499. An unsatisfactory means you just score 1.0 to 1.999, which is not good. So that's why I'm saying during each of these portions, you want to get a proficient, accomplished, or exemplary. You don't want to get a needed or emergent. And in your final score, you do not want to get a needs improvement or unsatisfactory, because that's just mean you failed. You want to get a highly effective or effective, right? On your score. So that's just to go over all of these portions here. Let me know if you need a copy of those documents. If you need, please comment and I'll put it on my website. So for the actual observation date, to go back to that date, although I just went over all those things, the observation dates is where you will do your actual lesson. So you're gonna have your introduction. So one thing I advise you to do, make sure you have your standard display. Whatever standard you're working on, please have it displayed. That's most important. That's what they are looking for. Observers want to see that you include the standard in your lesson, and that's the majority portion of your planning conference and post-conference question, because that is what you will be teaching, and that's a part of the curriculum. They want to see that you are teaching by the standards, right? So the observation date, please go ahead and display your standard in the lesson. You want to make sure that you restate what you learned yesterday. So for example, so kids, remember yesterday we learned about, for example, let me go back to the example that I used earlier. So yesterday we learned about how to count objects from 0 to 20. Today we are going to learn about how to compare those objects into less than, equal to, or greater than, right? So you want to make sure you just briefly state, reminding them what they learned yesterday or previously, and then you want to go ahead and state what they will be learning. You want to state the standard, right? So for example, today students, you will be able to compare the number of objects from 0 to 20 in two groups using the term less than, great, equal to, or greater than. So you see how I just included that. I stated the standard to them, and I also have my standard displayed. Just to let you know, observation is usually for 30 minutes, formal observation. I'm not sure how they do it at your school, but it's usually 30 minutes, right? And one plus is to make sure you have your center set up. So that's just like a little plus, because I know they like to see when you're doing centers in your classroom. So if you could have them just, if you could show them your centers, or if you could just show the students being sent to their centers for a little, for 2 minutes or so, that would be great after you have taught the lesson. So you want to ensure, so firstly, you want to ensure you introduce the lesson, make sure you have your standards display, and you also state the standards. You want to make sure you have a direct instruction portion where you're actually teaching the lesson. Make sure you include your video. So for example, if you're doing math, you could use one of those video on Sabbath where it teaches the the unit or whatever educational video you have. Make sure you have your teaching portion where you do the I do, where the teacher does it, then you do it with the students, the we do, and then the you do, which the student is going to do as a practice, right? So you want to make sure you do one so they see. You have one where you do it together with the students, and you have a time where the independent practice where you have the students do it. Make sure you're walking around. Make sure you are using hands-on in your lesson. Make sure you have something that's hands-on. They like to see students engaged. Be calm. Do not be nervous. Just act as if nobody's in the classroom with you, or actually just act as if you're you have a spectator. That's it. Don't be nervous. Nothing to be nervous about. Think about the times when you were doing your observations or your practicums in college, or reflect on it and see what you can take from the experiences you learned during your student teaching or your practicum. Try to remember what feedback you got from the observer, so to see what you could fix and improve in this upcoming observation, right? Also, stay prayed up. That's one of my favorite advices. I believe in Jesus. I know He comes true. I pray to Him all the time, and I ask Him to help me with these observations, and He really do. So I really hope you have like a spiritual life. If not, look into it. Nothing hurts to get to know Jesus. He's our Lord and our Savior. He's there to help. So I always advise people to stay prayed up and to just trust and believe that God will see you through this observation, and just ask that His presence will be with you so that everything just runs smoothly. All right. So I already went through the planning conference already. Um, oh, make sure you bring your pretest to the planning conference as well, because you want to ensure that um, you want to show that you're going to give them a pretest. At the post reflection conference, you will bring this reflection conference questions. So the reflection conference is where you will discuss your observation with the principal or whoever observed you. You will go over the talking points, you will get your score, and those portions that I showed you earlier, you will be going over it with the observer. Make sure these questions are done to bring to your reflection conference. Make sure you send it beforehand, because they're going to ask you these questions as well. And they are going to discuss whether you got a proficient, exempt. They're going to discuss these areas with you, and they're going to score you um, in each area, and so you get your final score. Remember, you want to get either a highly effective or effective. That's a good score. You will see this in eye observation at the end, and you just have to acknowledge it. So that means you have to go log into eye observation, so click it and just see what you got scored on. you're going to go to evaluations. You're going to press evaluations and press my evaluations, and you will see your score in the different areas. And then I think you have to press acknowledge to show that you acknowledge or you saw your results. And that is it for the observation. I hope this helps. As I said, if you are interested in how to go about filling the planning conference questions and the reflection conference questions out, please comment down below. I can show you question by question how to go ahead and do that. So in that video, I would just give an example. I would go over each questions with an example. And you want to make sure you relate these questions to the protocols that I showed you, because the protocols are what the observers are really looking for. So I want to wish you the best of luck on your observations. If you have any questions, comment it down below. If you are an experienced teacher watching this video, please comment as well. I really hope this video works, helps also, and I just wish you all the best. So until next time, thank you for tuning in, and go ahead and check out my website, which will be down in the description below. Please make sure you let me know if you want me to make a video with the specifics. It will be on my website. And yeah, so until next time.